like this is becoming like not a daily vlog, but like a weird like vlog with topics. I just got the best news. I keep getting good news, but yesterday it actually made it final. So I'm really excited to release this, hopefully within the next 3 weeks when I'm back in LA. I'm so excited, so excited. But I wanted to film a video today to talk a little bit about traveling, because I feel like this is a common question that people always ask me, and I'm doing a giveaway about in 3 hours after this video goes up on Instagram. I'm gonna give away an airplane ticket, just because I think that this is something that is probably a giveaway most people don't see, but also hopefully will inspire you to travel and do something really cool with your life this summer. So when I first dropped out of high school and went to online school, I ended up taking a trip to Turkey, to Istanbul, to visit my sister, because my sister moved there when I was about 16 or 17, or she was going back and forth from New York with her boyfriend. But before that, I should back up to when I first started traveling. So I started my blog when I was 12, but when I first actually started traveling, I ended up getting myself a free flight from British Airways. So I had never really traveled before. I would buy bus tickets back and forth to New York to go to Fashion Week from where I'm from in Connecticut. So I would take the bus from Hartford. And how I afforded to do that initially was honestly any money that I would get. I started like a small side job on LinkedIn doing people's social media. So every time I would get paid every week, that's how I could afford to buy bus tickets. From Connecticut to from Hartford, Connecticut to New York, bus tickets are honestly pretty cheap. So they would be like, I think like $40 round trip. And then anytime it was like Christmas, I bought my first ticket with a Visa gift card my uncle gave me, which was like a $50 Visa gift card. And that's how I bought my first bus ticket. And then that was what I first started doing. That's really how I started traveling a little bit, more so just from like city to city. And then I'm only an hour and a half away from Boston too. So sometimes I could convince my parents to drive down there. When I had first started my blog, we would go on like a weekday trip or a weekend trip when I was in school. And then when I was about, I think 15 or 16, that's when I first pitched British Airways. So obviously I have a website, so that helped me initially, because there weren't a lot of bloggers out there at the time when I started. So that's really how I kind of started to do the kind of cool traveling that I get to do, or did get to do, was because of the website that I had. So I initially, which I've talked about in prior videos, I can link it below, how I started pitching brands to get sponsorships. But I first emailed British Airways, this is way before, like if I were to do this now and start that relationship now, it probably wouldn't be a thing, because I bet the girl who I know at British Airways is getting emailed by like millions of people a day. But when I first emailed her, I was able to show that I had this website. And then I went to Turkey with my mom to visit my sister when I turned 16. And that was the year that I decided to transfer to online school, which was the best decision I ever made. And my school at the time was not supportive of it, but it was just a really good decision for me. I wasn't college bound because I was doing so poorly in school, which I don't advise at all, but I just couldn't, like I can't do science and I can't do math. So obviously I'd have one good grade in English, and then I would have a terrible grade in math and science and any other arts, and I was bullied and just didn't have a lot of friends and stuff. So it wasn't a good choice for me to really stay in school when I could do it online. And now online school is a lot more popular. But my mom and I found a Groupon. So my mom actually paid for that trip when I was 16 to visit my sister. I think we got the tickets, it all came to $1,100, and it was like a 12-day tour. And all of the hotels, if you use Gate One Travel, which is a really great travel retailer, whatever, which you can also find on Groupon, and they go to cities and countries across the world. And it was like a 12-day tour to Turkey, and we did like five different cities in Turkey, like Ankara, which is the capital, and Cappadocia, and all the hotels and stuff are paid for. So it's like all inclusive, and most of the food and stuff is too. And if you're going to somewhere like Turkey, obviously everything's a lot cheaper there. So we got that deal for $1,100, which my mom paid for, which I was really happy she paid for. And that was obviously the first time I had gone to any kind of country that wasn't necessarily Europe. So she paid for that, but I was still traveling on my own. So when I started getting into TV work, I started traveling for different brands that I was working with to different stations around the country. And I'm very just savvy with my money, so I try and make sure always when I'm getting paid, because this is my job, I'm making more money than I have to spend. But for those of you who are just looking to travel and do something fun, there are so many things that I would suggest. The first thing I would say, because I did this when I was younger, like I had no money and I was traveling, The first thing I would say is I think it could be a really good idea to start a website. Like if you want to do traveling stuff, and you literally even have like 5 blog posts on a site about traveling or whatever, call it like your first name, like Alexa Curtis Writes or something, then you can always say like, oh, I'm a blogger or whatever. And I know that's probably the easy way out, like the easy way to do this, but honestly, you can get so many perks just by having some type of presence on the internet. You don't need 100,000 Instagram followers. Having a website is a lot more substantial nowadays. Obviously, you can't expect to like get the Mandarin to comp you a room like they did for me, but that took me 6 years to make that happen, and that was very rare. So I would say you could definitely start a website. Groupon has really fantastic deals if you go to the travel section, and a lot of the times you will have to save up your money. So whatever money you're making, even $10 a week, use an app like Acorns. There's one called Robinhood, and that actually takes the spare change in your bank account, and it like doubles it every time you make a purchase and puts it in your account. So it's like a low-key like savings account that you don't even realize is happening because it's just taking out the spare change. So I would say you can start something like that, like one of those accounts, because then you'll have like money after like 6 months. You might have like $500 or $600 in this account, and it's all your money. So you can do that. I would say Groupon, one of those apps, Robinhood or Acorns, just in general, even if you're not looking to travel. And then when you're traveling, so depending on where you want to go, obviously you can buy bus tickets. Anybody can make $10 or $20. I don't care what town you're in. You can garden or mow a lawn or work at a coffee shop one day a week. And maybe that's what you have to do initially. If you really want to travel and do that kind of stuff, you might have to make a sacrifice. I've made so many sacrifices to do this for a career, and it didn't start easy at all. And I didn't have anybody, besides that one time my mom took me to Turkey, paying for traveling. So I've had to figure all this stuff out on my own. So I would say, yeah, you're gonna need to have some type of obviously like side income, because when you do travel, it's so fun to have extra money. You can still travel without a little bit of spare change, but it's more fun to have some spare change. So I would say definitely start with that, like getting some type of job. And then the other thing that I would highly suggest when you first start traveling is downloading some apps. Some that I use are Momondo, it's M-O-M-O-N-D-O, SkipLagged. There's one called Fly Smarter, I think. And then I always have frequent flyer miles. So I have frequent flyer miles for Turkish Airlines, United Airlines, Virgin America, which is now Atlantic, JetBlue, and Delta. And I personally fly all of them because I don't think it's worth it for me to fly like only Delta, because I'd end up spending more money on tickets just to get more miles. So I like to buy the cheapest ticket. But SkipLagged is an awesome app because if you download it, it's free, whatever. And what it basically does is, say you want to fly from Boston to Connecticut, no, Boston to New York, it will find a layover for you, and it ends up being cheaper. So sometimes it'll have me like a round trip ticket to Canada when I'm only actually taking the layover, which is in New York. So every time I buy tickets for like my friends and I send it to my friend, one of my friends in specific is always like, I don't understand, we're going to like South Carolina, why does it say we're going to Miami? And she calls me freaking out, and I'm like, because the layover is in South Carolina, but the actual ticket is for Miami. And obviously nobody knows, and it doesn't really make a difference. You just don't get on the second portion of the flight. So download one of those apps. And then also, at the beginning of every year, I like to think in my mind, where do I want to go this year? And how am I going to get there? So that might mean you have to track deals. Like Southwest always has a really good sale, like I think at the beginning of the year, and then like the middle of the year, and then towards the end of the year. So keep an eye, because some of those sales are crazy, like $30 tickets nonstop. And then also Norwegian Airways has really good flights that are really cheap too. And also you have to think too, like say you want to go to Europe, like when I first went to Europe with my group of friends and we went to like the south of France, we went to Cannes, we went to Berlin, we went to Amsterdam. Everywhere to travel in Europe is super cheap. So if you want to fly from New York or LA to London, like one way, it can, you know, be like $400 or $500 sometimes. And then if you want to fly from like London to Amsterdam or Amsterdam to Berlin, you can find buses, you can find trains, you can find planes for $40, $50 a flight, which is absolutely insane because everywhere in Europe is so cheap. So keep that in mind too, because if you want to, you know, you might spend one amount on the plane ticket, but wherever you're going, it could be so much cheaper in the city to like travel to other cities. So if you have the time and you can take like a week or 2 weeks off and go and travel Europe, then, you know, spend your time wisely there and go and visit some other cities because it's so much cheaper. And you can also use buses too. Like when I went with my friends, I think this was like 2 or 3 years ago, it was like some of my best girlfriends, and we all traveled to Europe together, and we were all like broke and had no money. I really don't know how we did it. I ended up getting us a lot of free hotels, which is I think how we did it. We ended up staying in Brussels. It was actually right after the attack in Brussels, but Brussels was so cheap at that time, so that's where we ended up staying. And I got us a really nice free hotel there, but we stayed there for one night because then we ended up taking a bus. I think it was like 12 hours or something, which I also got for free, but usually the bus is like $8 or $10 from Brussels to Amsterdam, I think. And it's so fun, like whether you're traveling alone or you're traveling with your friends, like you're stopping along the way and they have you stopping at rest stops, and everything in Europe is so much nicer. So the bus was actually really nice. And then where we stay, so where I stay now, a lot of the times I love hotels and I can afford a hotel, so usually I'll stay in hotels, or I'll use an app like HotelTonight. I get so many free rooms on hotels.com because I'm always booking, but make sure you make an account on hotels.com because every 10th room you'll get 1 night free. So I actually just redeemed my night for next week in Chicago because I had one free. It's the same for HotelTonight too, and you can actually put like a little bar, like a thing that says monitor these rates. So if you're looking at a specific night in like Chicago and you want to know if the rate's going to go down, it will keep you updated. So you can do that on HotelTonight. And then make sure you make an account on obviously all of your frequent flyers and like hotels.com too. And then when you're traveling, you can look at so many other places. So I personally don't, like I have a friend who goes to Europe and she travels alone and she stays on like couches of people. I personally wouldn't do that because that would scare me. I don't advise any young person to travel alone to Europe and stay on somebody's couch, but that's an option, I guess. I think it's called couch surfer. Again, I've never done it, nor would I suggest you advise you or your kids to do it, but you know, that's an option. And then obviously Airbnb, which I find is actually becoming a lot more expensive than hotels. So sometimes I'll Airbnb in a city, or there's hostels. So depending on where you're going, Turkey has a really cool hostel called Bunk. I stayed there when I first went with one of my friends to Turkey. The coolest hostel in the world. I think it was like $12 a night. We ended up getting 1 room that we stayed in together. Hostels obviously are notorious for having like 12 or 15 bunks in a room, but a lot of the time you can actually get private rooms and they're cheaper. So they can be up to like $40 a night. And then all of the food and stuff is so cheap, and you end up meeting a lot of different people, so that's really cool. So when I went with my friends to Europe, we stayed in hostels in Berlin. I got a bed and breakfast that we ended up getting kicked out of in Amsterdam because of one of my girlfriends who I'm not really friends with anymore, aka because she got us kicked out. And then in Brussels we stayed in a hotel, but in Berlin we stayed in one called St. Christopher's. Is a really great line of hostels, and then you meet so many people. Like when you're in Europe and you want to meet people and go out, the best thing to do is stay at a hostel. It's so much cheaper. You can rent a room for all of your friends, and you have the option to do stuff that hostels like have ongoing. Obviously the drinking age in Europe is 18, so they have like bar and pub crawls and like all this different stuff, and it's just really fun, and they show you around the city. So that's what I would suggest for when you're traveling. I would either say stay in Airbnbs if you can find cheap ones, or honestly, I'm a huge hostel fan. Like I love hostels, so I would stay in those. But make sure you use, I think it's hostelworld.com, because I've had situations where I've wanted to stay in a hostel and then I look up the reviews and they're really bad. And obviously a hotel is going to be better than a hostel, but if you have to stay in a hostel, you really want to look up the reviews, just because it's Europe and you don't know who else is staying there, and you just want to make sure you're safe. So whenever you're traveling anywhere, whether you're going alone, which I love traveling alone, I travel alone a lot, or whether you're traveling with friends, just be safe, be aware of your surroundings, always keep an eye on like the news and stuff, because I wouldn't suggest you travel to like Syria or like North Korea or South Korea right now, just in general. Coming from the one who just went to Turkey, which is like it was totally fine. But I would just keep an eye on everything and make sure that you're safe, but also make sure that like, if you need a $500 loan on a credit card, take out a credit card. You can pay back $100 a month or $50 a month. I have taken out a decent amount of credit cards in my life, and I've put trips on them. Like I put a whole trip to Hawaii last year on a credit card, and I think I'm still paying it off. I honestly don't really pay attention to it, but was it worth it? Totally. And am I paying it off? totally. But who really cares? Like, you only have this one life. If you're putting like $20,000 on a credit card, I wouldn't suggest that unless it's some huge thing you need to put on a card. But if you're putting something under $1,000 on a card, let yourself live. Like, you're gonna be able to pay it back one day, and this is the time in your life when you can just have fun and kind of say screw it and do what you want. So I hope that helps. A little bit of advice on how I travel and how I used to travel when I was super broke. And I'll leave some links below to some of the apps that I mentioned too. And then make sure to check out my Instagram around 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today for a flight giveaway. Mwah. Make sure you do something today for Fearless Fridays. Oh my God, it's getting so sunny out here. That gets you out of your comfort zone. And stay tuned for some awesome news. Bye.